So what we're going to do here is a little demo with JASP for getting some basic frequency tables, histograms. I'm going to use some real data from the 2020 season here so far for the Diamondbacks just for fun. So we'll revisit some things like how do you open data, how do you make changes to data, how do you then go about getting your descriptive statistics, more on that in coming weeks, and most importantly for these weeks, doing things like histograms and frequency tables. So the first thing you're going to do when you have this screen is go to open your data. In this case, I have some data that I have saved in a CSV file, comma separated values. These can import very easily into JASP. So I can import a data file for the Diamondbacks. And this is data that I obtained from a baseball reference website. So this data is from that website. So here we have a variety of players and variables. So the players, of course, represent the units of analysis, that is the individual cases we have measured, right? We have measured a variety of variables for them, the position they play, their ages, how many games they've played. These are all players who have played more than 2 games. Their at-bats, runs, hits, doubles, so on. If we click, we can drag across to see more just by clicking and holding. That allows us to navigate through these very easily. If you wanted to change coding on a variable, you can do that by clicking on the variable itself to apply labels and values to it. Okay. If you want to change a scale of measurement for a variable, you click on the symbol next to it, and you can change it from which is scale, which is interval, ratio, ordinal, or nominal. So, for example, doubles here it has as ordinal, but that's just as scale. It's a ratio, right? 0 is none. It's a count variable, as hits would be. So the fact that it's identified these things in that way, I can go change those if I want to. You'll notice here that name is identified as nominal with a letter A, which means that these are not numeric, but alpha values, right? So same here for position because there are letters contained within it. So the first thing you want to do is always make sure that your variables are coded the way you want them to be. And you want to make sure that there's nothing that would impede your ability to analyze a variable. So for example, you can do very few things analyzing variables that are alpha instead of numeric. So pay attention to that, make sure it's correct. And you can go through and update whatever things you want to. So I'm going to call these all scale. Some of them are clearly count variables. A lot of them are count variables. Some of them, like batting average or on-base percentage, are percentages. Or here, they're actually proportions, right? We'll talk a lot about that. So these things are written as proportions. A lot of people don't like proportions, but in baseball, it's a great example where they call things percentages, but they actually report them as proportions. So people say, what's your batting percentage or batting average, on-base percentage, but notice this is the proportion. To make it a percentage, I'd have to multiply it by 100, right? So on base 34% of the time, but the way that it's actually, the way that the on base percentage, which is the statistic name, the way that it's reported is actually an on base proportion. So that's important. We'll talk a lot about that in statistics as well. So just an interesting example of this. So what we're going to do here is look at batting averages for the Diamondbacks players. I think we've got 16 players here on this roster who have played more than 2 games. And we're going to do that using some basic descriptive analysis in JASP. So if we go to descriptive statistics, and then descriptive statistics under there, it opens up all our variables that we want to analyze. And you can also do splits. So you can analyze for subsets. So for example, if I wanted to look at age and then split it by something like walks or whatever you might do, I could also make age groups like players under 30 and players 30 and over, right? I can make a variable like that and then see whether or not the younger players and the older players have different levels by summarizing their statistics by age group. So that's what the split does. It breaks them into groups to allow you to compare them side by side. In this case, we're not going to use that. You notice that the default for descriptive statistics is that it will produce a box that has how many people reported the thing, how many people did not, right? So the valid number of observations, the missing number of observations, the mean, right, the arithmetic average, the standard deviation, the minimum, and the maximum. Those are the default descriptives, we'll see that we can get more options than that. So if we take over batting percentage or batting average to the variable box, it'll immediately fill this out. We have 16 players that gave us a batting average. None of them have missing data. The average is 0.207. So the batting average for the 16 players, the average for the team is about 21%, right? So 1 in 5 times people get a hit. The standard deviation, 0.089. 0 is the minimum. The highest batting average is 325, right? And if we go back to our data, which we can do using this arrow to go back to the data, we could, in a small data set like this, see, well, who has that 325? So the batting average 325, here we go, call row 7. So the center fielder has that batting average. So we can go back to our analysis, just like this. And then you see down here we can get frequency tables if we're dealing with nominal or ordinal variables. We can always turn them into categories if we need to. My other video showed you how you could do that using Excel. If you wanted to, you could also code this as ordinal if you just needed to quickly get a table for it. We can also get distribution plots. If you want to, you can get a density over it. And so here is our histogram, the distribution plot. So what this shows us is on the x-axis we have the batting averages. So the variable values always go on x. And then on the y-axis you're always going to have some probability, density, or frequency, which basically is how much the thing happens. So here we have frequencies, the counts, how many people, how many players had the average in these ranges. So you can see that you've got one player who's down here with a very low batting average. Most players cluster in this space between 1 and 2.5, right? 0.25, excuse me. And then there's a couple players who are batting, you've got 2 batting between 0.25 and 0.3, and you've got 3 batting over 300, right? So 3 of 16 players batting over 300. So this distribution plot or histogram is something that you need to be able to develop for your assignments using JASP. And that is how you would do it. So easy enough to use a variety of options. There are some other options you can use in here, box plots, which allow you to see kind of a spread of values. We'll talk about briefly, but they're not required for your assignment. We'll talk about QQ plots more for analyzing normality in future weeks. And then you can also increase what kinds of statistics you might want to get. So you can get the variance, you can get the other measures of central tendency. We'll see more on this in coming weeks. So there's a bunch of easy click options under these sub areas, okay? And you can navigate between these windows very simply with these arrows. If you needed to do something like upload this, you can always save this image in a variety of ways. So you could do screenshots or you can export these output files if you'd like to. So you can do that simply by doing something like this. Right here, if you click on this arrow, you can copy or save the image. So if I copy the image, I could just paste that into a Word document or into Canvas. Similarly, you can save the image onto your desktop for later use. So it's very easy to use these files for other purposes as well. Hopefully that helps you with some basic things, again, kind of revisiting, navigating JASP, doing a variety of tasks regarding to coding your data and things like that, and here also producing the histogram. So hopefully that helps.